The competition is really heating up as AMD also announced the availability of the new Radeon RX 7600 only one day after Nvidia's RTX 4060 Ti performance showcase. You can watch our video at the top right corner there for more details of that card. The RX 7600 is in many ways targeting the same segment as the RTX 4060. Both of them are aiming for 1080p gaming segment and priced at $299 as well. Since the RTX 4060 was announced but not available yet, we are not able to do a direct comparison with that card, and we'll just have to make do with whatever kind of performance that we can get our hands within these cards that we have. At first glance, I really do think that this card looks really good. I mean, I do like the current generation Radeon reference cards design, and for a small form factor PC fan or myself, I think this is an excellent design and definitely right up my alley. Actually not my alley, but Mr. Doogie's alley, because he uses SFF all the time. Based on the specs list, it has a rated TBP of 165 watts and uses a single 8-pin PCIe connector. I like how AMD kept the whole design real simple and positioned the connector way at the end of the PCB, so it's much easier for cable management. The display output options are also pretty much the standard nowadays. You got triple display ports and also a single HDMI port, just like the 4060 Ti. For the specs of our test bench, we decided to use this list of hardware on the screen here, and yeah, we've decided to compare it against the RTX 3060 Ti, RTX 3070 and also the RTX 4060 Ti, just to give you an idea of how this card will perform against those cards. Even though this card is said to be meant for 1080p gaming only, we will still test it with 4K and 1440p resolutions just to know how well it will perform, just like what we did with the RTX 4060 Ti. While we can still see some reasonable frame rates at 4K resolution, it's only applicable on some titles that we've tested so far, and I would advise you to not to push your luck on this one at this time. The performance numbers are looking better if we scale it down to 1440p, as we are able to get above 40 FPS on a majority of the titles that we've actually tested, and yeah, it is actually playable at this resolution. And for 1080p, we can see more than 80 FPS on average across the board of all the titles that we've tested, and that's actually quite respectable. Up next is ray tracing performance, and we have the graphics settings and ray tracing turned on to ultra and FSR to quality preset, just to see how far we can actually get this card to run. And from the results here, we can see that these settings are definitely not suitable for the RX 7600 at 4K resolution. Even when we lowered the graphical settings and the FSR to performance, it didn't really help much with this situation. Lowering the resolution down to 1440p, we can see that some games are actually playable and it actually has a consistent frame rate as well. And we can see better results at 1080p resolution, but there are still exceptions, such as some of the games that are really heavily dependent on RT processing, such as the infamous Cyberpunk 2077, as well as RT-enabled titles that only come with DLSS support, which will obviously put the Radeon cards in a bad spot. It's clear that AMD still has a lot of catching up to do when it comes to ray tracing performance, but with the increasing number of games and game developers that are adopting FSR 2 and above in their games right now, I really hope to see more titles getting the same treatment so that Radeon cards can actually put up a good fight against the Nvidia cards. Moving on to the thermals and power draw, this is what interests me a lot. The power consumption of the RX 7600 is actually comparable with the 4060 Ti, as both cards draw somewhere around 165 watts at peak. As for the temperature, AMD claims that the RX 7600 might reach all the way to 105 degrees Celsius on the junction temperature, but we've yet to see any of the sensors on this card reaching 100 degrees, so yeah, I would have to say it's well within the safety limits. So at the end of the day, the RX 7600 is just what AMD claims it to be. It's a card made specifically for 1080p gaming with either high or ultra graphical settings. Of course, that is only for pure Raster performance. once we introduce ray tracing into the mix, then we can see the performance is not gonna be as good, as we will have to lower the graphical settings to somewhere around mid, and also FSR to either performance or balance in order to get playable frame rates. The list of games available now that has FSR 2 and above is definitely growing, but even with FSR enabled, we can see that the RX 7600 struggles in most of the titles that we have tested so far if we are going full blast in the graphical settings. It doesn't mean that you can't play these games with RT enabled, it's just that the RX 7600 has a lot of compromises to be made in order to achieve a playable frame rate. So is $299 a good price for the RX 7600? Honestly, it depends on how you look at it. If you only focus on the game performance, then the older gen RTX 3060 Ti can be purchased for under 1,300 ringgit right now, and that makes the RX 7600 look bad, especially when the cheapest model of this card is at 1,599 ringgit. If you are into other features such as AV1 encoding capabilities, the suite of AMD technologies, AI or creative workloads that are optimized for AMD Radeon GPUs, then the price tag is somewhat reasonable, maybe. And let's not forget that we still do not know how the RTX 4060 will perform since it is not released yet. And the RTX 4060 is also priced at $299, and that would make it a direct competitor with this card. So that's all for this video. What are your thoughts on the RX 7600? Is it a hit or miss? Do let us know what you think down in the comment section below, and we will see you guys in the next video.